I've just finished High Rise by J.G. Ballard, and this has gone a long way to restoring my faith in his writing as a surrealist writer. Having read before this Hello America, which I did not like, and which you can see my opinion in a previous video. Put a link in the description below. This, on the other hand, is much more Ballardian in its theme and style, claustrophobia, violence, and disintegration of English middle class life. And so I would recommend this to anyone if you wanted an entrance into J.G. Ballard's writing. This would be a good place to start because you'll get a good impression of the kind of way he writes. This novel was written in 1975, and he seems to have written his early novels in two tranches. The very best ones, I think, were written at the beginning of the 60s, and they include The Wind from Nowhere, The Drowned World, and The Drought, also published as The Burning World. And they were published in 1961, 62, and 64. All of those I would recommend, even though Ballard's estate seems to have disowned The Wind from Nowhere, claiming that it wasn't up to the writing standard of his later works. But I remember that when I read it, I thought it was a brilliant idea and quite horrifying in Ballard's kind of surrealistic disintegration of society way. He then has a second tranche of novels at the beginning of the 70s that include The Atrocity Exhibition, Crash, Concrete Island, and High Rise. This is part of that second tranche, and this encourages me that those other books in his early 70s writings may well be good. The Hello America was written at the beginning of the 1980s. And Hello America, as I say, I did not like it. I think he was going for farce and pastiche, and it did not work. I don't think he pulled it off at all. And the novel doesn't have the same kind of claustrophobia and fear and disintegration that he manages to capture so well in his other novels. The novel that he wrote after Hello America was Empire of the Sun, which is his essentially autobiography of his youth when he was interned in a Japanese prison camp for 2 years as a young teenager, and the profound effect that that had on him, and the way that influenced his writing. I mean, he doesn't talk about that in the novel, but it clearly you can see where the way he sees the world and writes about it comes from once you read Empire of the Sun, which is a terrific read and quite different really than for example this. But as I say, really worth reading if you want to understand J.G. Ballard. Anyway, it's talking a little bit more about High Rise. What is High Rise about? High Rise is about a high rise building. We call them a skyscraper in the United States, and it's about three characters in that building. The building is full of professional middle class people, and they occupy floors kind of based on whether they're lower middle class, middle class, or upper middle class. So the lower middle classes are hostesses, some pilots, kind of. I think the character that Ballard follows lower down in the high rise, he's a cameraman, and then in the middle classes we have a doctor. I think is he a psychologist? He might be a psychologist. And then at the top of the skyscraper we have the architect who actually designed the skyscraper. So I'll read you a few quotes from the book just to give you an impression of what you might be getting into if you did decide to read it. As I say, I would recommend it. So here is the opening sentence. Later, let me just double check I'm still recording. Yeah, I am. Sorry. Later, as he sat on his balcony eating the dog, Dr. Lang reflected on the unusual events that had taken place within this huge apartment building during the previous 3 months. So, yes, the dog actually features at various points. And so later on, it's a kind of, it's a foreshadowing, even though this is we get it's all in flashback. When you meet the dog later, you're like, oh yeah, it's that one. It takes a bit of time to work out which one it is because there are a number of dogs that appear in the story. The dogs do not have a very good fate, as you might imagine. And so this is so Dr. Lang was the middle class inhabitant of this high-rise building, and he is on the 25th floor, which is kind of in the middle. There are 40 floors altogether on the high rise. I just wanted to give you an impression of how the disintegration of societal norms gradually happens in the skyscraper. And here's a quote. This is Dr. Lang still. In the early afternoon, the first of a fresh series of provocations took place between the rival floors, setting in motion again the dominant machinery of disruption and hostility. The incidents were trivial enough, but Lang knew already they reflected deep rooted antagonisms that were breaking through the surface of life within the high rise at more and more points. So the whole thing starts off, with semi trivial incidents, but then they escalate rapidly and become much more serious. And then here is a quote from the lower middle class occupant of the skyscraper, and his name is Richard Wilder. During the week after the jeweller's death, events moved rapidly in a more disquieting direction. Richard Wilder, 24 floors below Dr. Lang, and for that reason far more exposed to the pressures generated within the building, was among the first to realize the full extent of the changes taking place. And as noted in various commentaries at the beginning and the end of the book, the architecture of the building plays a role in the way that society disintegrates within it. And then I'll give you a quote from Anthony Royal, who is the architect who designed the building and who lives in it for a little while. This huge building he had helped to design was moribund, its vital functions fading one by one, the water pressure falling as the pumps faltered, the electrical substations on each floor switching themselves off, the elevators stranded in their shafts. So, what happens is as society collapses within the building, but specifically within the building and not outside it, uh, all the structures that are being supported by the people who normally maintain them also start to collapse as well. And so you have the kind of collapse in the way that people interact with each other is mirrored and amplified by the way that the building is starting to fail as well. And so there are lots of scenes where, for example, there are swimming pools on the 10th floor and the 35th floor. And of course, they go out of use. And their use then becomes much more macabre later on. And Ballard is very good in progressing that collapse and decay of society within the building, and also making it feel very claustrophobic, very specific to the building itself, to the point where what's going on outside is a perfectly normal society, but what goes on in the building is this collapse and decay to, in the end, complete barbarism. And the different characters play different roles in that collapse. The Richard Wilder from the lower floor is literally like a barbarian, and Dr. Lang is kind of is more he's a more of an introvert and kind of moves within himself. And Anthony Royal at the top is like the king who is gradually being dethroned. And they interact with each other at various points during the narrative, but they don't ever really act together. What Ballard is doing is he's giving us three views of the way that the society within the high rise collapses. And it comes to, I would say, quite a satisfying ending. And there are lots of grisly, peculiar, bizarre, strange, and disturbing scenes and events on the way to the end of the novel. So in summary, I would say that High Rise is definitely worth your time if you're into societal collapse, decay, surrealism, and bad things happening. And also, I would say, I suspect that the reason why it's so good is because Ballard, rather than taking a widescreen view as he does in Hello America, trying to give us a kind of sardonic pastiche of all of the United States. Here he focuses on a small microcosm within society, just within this high-rise building, and he's very good at that. I wonder whether that doesn't come from his time at the internment camp. I think it was in Shanghai itself, where he saw this same microcosm of these middle class people, particularly his parents, gradually being undone by the circumstances around them. And there's one of the good things about this edition, which is a bit kind of scrappy and beaten up. One of the good things about it is it does have some commentary at the beginning, and also it has a brief interview with Ballard at the end, both of which are very informative about the novel itself. Anyway, as I say, very good, thoroughly recommended. You won't be disappointed. At least I don't think you'll be disappointed if you go out and get this and read it. Okay, all the best. Bye. In the meantime, you can read my short story collections, which are available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, various other outlets. Just go to my website and check the details.